morning to St. Matthew's United Methodist Church. This is the first time we have attempted something like this. The risk here is that as a church, we should not be partisan. Therefore, we have both major candidates here. But as Christians, if we follow Jesus Christ, we need to be advocates. And as such, that means we need to get involved, one way or the other, in trying to influence how people view our governments, and also try to influence candidates and those who are in public office. So therefore today we are offering two major candidates for mayor of Bowie. And let me introduce them to you. To my immediate left is Fred Robinson. He was elected mayor in April 1998 and re-elected 7 times. He had previously served in the city council from 1986 to 1994. He's a retired district commander of the Prince George's County Police Department, which, by the way, Mr. Mayor, I'm proud to hear about that because my son-in-law is a homicide detective in Prince George's County. Mayor Robinson earned a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from the University of Maryland and a master's degree in criminal justice from George Washington University. Mayor Robinson and his wife Jackie have lived in Bowie since 1968. They're proud parents of Timothy, Amy, Sarah, and Christopher, and have 5 beautiful grandchildren. Mayor Robinson has been active in youth sports and recreation programs for over 20 years, where he has served as a coach and game official for Boys and Girls Club programs in soccer, baseball, and basketball. He is also a member of St. Edward's Catholic Church, the Knights of Columbus, the Bowie Elks, Disney Bell Post 66 of the American Legion, and Lodge 89 of the Fraternal Order of Police. Welcome, Mr. Mayor. And next, Councilman Dennis Brady grew up in an olive drab household. And I think many of us can identify with that, Mr. Councilman, because I retired Air Force. So anyway, both parents served in the U.S. Army during World War II. His father retired after 23 years of active duty service. He spent 6 years in the U.S. Navy, which much of it on board the USS Alexander Hamilton, a strategic missile submarine. He received 2 undergraduate engineering degrees from North Carolina State University and a graduate engineering degree from the Johns Hopkins University. In January of this year, he retired from the federal service after 29 years of service. The last 23 as National Institute of Standards and Technology. He has 34 years of experience in the nuclear field. He has been an at-large member of the Bowie City Council for over 21 years. Councilman Brady has served alongside the mayor during his 17-year tenure. Councilman Brady is married to Kathy Disher Brady, a physical therapist at the National Rehabilitation Hospital. They have been married for 30 years and have been residents of Bowie since 1987. And so welcome, Mr. Councilman. We are pleased that you were able to join us. So I've asked each of them to give a short opening statement, and I will begin with Mayor Robinson. Mr. Mayor.
Good morning, or good afternoon. How many of you woke up an hour late today? I want to thank St. Matt's for hosting this event. It's always good to visit here. I've been here on a number of occasions over the years for weddings, for funerals, for scout activities and community outreach, and you've always been a great partner with the community, so I thank you for that. Bowie's been my home now for nearly 50 years. My wife and I raised our 4 great children here, and we're now schooling 5 great-grandchildren. We've been blessed to have spent the most important part of our lives here in Bowie, and I will be forever thankful for the decision my wife made when we jointly decided to move to Bowie. We have some challenges. Ray suggested that he wanted to ask about some challenges in the future. We're not unlike other communities. We've had some challenges. We've had raging storms, and we've had economic uncertainty. We've had some great times. We've had some sad times. We've had some transportation issues, and we have road issues. But we've always faced them together. In storm events, we share everything from electricity to food to transportation to babysitting. And that's the mark of a great community. We're proud and most fortunate to have that great sense of community here. We've had some economic challenges. We've worked to keep folks in their homes. We've shared everything from support to food and to babysitting again. We have some education challenges. Many of them are related to the condition of some of the schools we've had. Tulip Grove is one of our success options. It is moving forward with reconstruction. Unfortunately, it's about a year behind schedule at the moment. Bowie High School still needs some significant infrastructure improvements, and I firmly believe we still need a second high school in the city. But we are making significant progress. We have a growing need for more quality and affordable senior housing, and we need to blend all of these things into a city-supported program. We've been very blessed with a strong veterans community, but we need to continue to support our military service and the veteran community. They have done so much for us. With all that said, Bowie is a tremendous place, and we're at a great time in our history. Our financial condition is the region of the industry, is the envy of the region. The budget's in balance, the bills are paid, and we have substantial reserves. And we're one of only 2 cities in the state of Maryland that has earned Wall Street recommendation of AAA bond rating. We have incredible core city services. Our public works system is second to none. Our recycling process is an example of success. Our public safety and police system is an incredible example of how working effectively with the community we can produce not only a condition of safety, but a strong sense of security in the community. We build a strong residential and strong business community where both can prosper, and we can truly build a multi-generational community that honors our history and happily looks forward to embracing the future. And to that end, I actually feel sorry for the folks that don't live here. Problems, yeah, we have some, but they're not sufficient to stop us on our road to a great future. If we're willing to work together and to make progress, I take that position and I take that obligation seriously. I've worked to bring Bowie together as a community, and I think we've come a long way. We are recognized for a lot of things. We have a great senior center, we have a tremendous gymnasium, we have just tons of recreational and reflection areas, we have an inviting city hall, and we have an effective city police department. We're noted for rebuilding efforts that brought us an improved and effective Bowie Town Center. We're rebuilding much of our Main Street area, an area that now sees Marketplace rising from the ashes to take its place as a strong focal point in the community. And all that's important. But it's also important that we've rebuilt our relationships with other levels of government, and importantly with the business community that adds economic vitality, jobs, and commerce to the community. If you look at this campaign, several things stand out. Elected leaders in every level of government we work with have looked at the candidates in this race, and almost all have endorsed my campaign. And it's truly bipartisan. Their support comes from all the way from the governor, our federal leadership, to our county leadership. And our great public safety officers that run to danger rather than run away from it have looked at both of the candidates, and they too have endorsed me. Forbes magazine recognizes Bowie as one of the best in the Atlantic region. Money magazine recently rated Bowie number 26 in all the cities and towns in the United States of America. We're frequently cited as the safest, strongest, most family-focused community in the region. If you look at the folks that animate our city, our faith community, our seniors, our PTA folks, our veterans, our Boys and Girls Club, and our civic associations, you'll see an overwhelming support for my approach to bringing people together to achieve progress. Yes, we've had some problems, but our opportunities for the future are great. Our opportunities aren't matched in our history. We can keep going if we adhere to a couple of simple rules most of the folks in this room understand more than most. Openness is better than divisiveness. Bringing people together is better than dividing them. In every piece of correspondence you've received from me, every word you've heard from me, every commitment you've heard me say has been positive. There's not a single word on any of my flyers attacking an opponent or dividing the community into special interests. There's not a single mean-spirited observation about anyone in the process. I think that's the road to success. I remain convinced that whatever challenge confronts us, if we stay together, face them together, and resist the slings and arrows, we can truly achieve an incredible future. We're limited only by our imagination and our willingness to work to achieve that. So I want to thank you again for inviting me here today, and look forward to a spirited discussion. Thank you all very much.
Mr. Councilman, you will please.
Thank you for hosting this. This is an interesting time in the city of Bowie. We've had many successes. We have some challenges in the horizon. Now, my apologies, I Probably should have assumed we'd have an opening statement, but that was not the information provided, so I'm going to wing it, so if you'll bear with me. My wife and I moved to Bowie purely by accident. I had taken a job at Calvert Cliffs, and she had a job in Towson, and Bowie happened to be in the middle. And while a year later, she changed jobs, 2 years later, I changed jobs. We fell in love with Bowie in 1987 and decided to make it our home for a long while, probably until the end. And I've seen a lot happen and grow, for the good and for the bad. It's oftentimes in city council, I oftentimes go last, so it's easy to say the speaker before me has touched on everything. And for the most part, a lot of what the mayor has said is quite true. We are the envy of the region. We are an outstanding, large city that has been able to maintain its small town image and vitality and friendliness and what have you. We have neighbors that look after one another, look out for each other. We have programs that benefit the youth, the seniors. We go out of our way to help the veterans and what have you. And that is quite true. And that will continue. The big difference I see, because the mayor alluded to my campaign. And I would suggest that the big difference, marked difference between his campaign and my campaign is the fact that if you look at all those pieces of literature that he sent out, it doesn't talk about the future. He's resting on the laurels of the past. He talks about things that have happened in the past and how we got to be the AAA bonded city in the state, how we have City Hall that is extremely fantastic facility. And the nice thing about that was the fact that it came in under budget and well under budget and on time, which is unusual whenever any government does any programs. Because usually you're talking about over budgets in years past. Those were all accomplishments that were group accomplishments. And to a great extent, it really reflects well on the excellent staff that we have, from the city manager down to the lowest level in the city hall. And that is a testament to consistency on the part of councils over the past probably 50 years. We have set up programs such as the Equipment Acquisition Fund, the Building Maintenance Fund, and things like that, that has helped to stabilize costs in the future by maintaining the ability to set aside a little bit every year to address problems as they arise. And that was something that happened long before the mayor and I got on board, but we've continued that. We've had solid growth in the business community. We've had great growth in the residential community, but we do have some issues. And probably one of the most glaring issues that we have is dealing with transportation. Now, you have to break that into two different parts. One part is that is controlled by the county and the state, and we have limited ability to affect change when it comes to that. But internally, there is a significant potential for transportation issues as a result of the 2,500 residential units at Milford. Bel Air Drive is going to be significantly impacted. There's going to be a lot of cut-through traffic on the other, so the next council is going to have to deal with that. So while we have had great successes, we are the envy of the county, if not, and the state. We have challenges in the future, and I think now's the time to select a mayor that will face those challenges and has a forward-looking campaign, not resting on the laurels. Thank you, and again, thank you for hosting this.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your opening comments. You both brought out perhaps what you consider the most important or the most crucial issues affecting Bowie that you see for the immediate future. But as mayor, how would you go about addressing these issues? And I'd like to begin with the councilman first for this.
Well, as I said in my comments, probably the most significant one that we have is the transportation impact. I mean, you can have great residences, you can have excellent businesses, you can have everything imaginable you need, but if you can't get people to and fro, if you can't get people to go through the city or get to work or what have you, it has a negative impact. It has a great impact on the quality of life in your neighborhoods when you have cut-through traffic, and that's what we'll see. On the horizon, we have State Highway stepping forward after many years of the city working with our county and state counterparts to get the expansion of 197 between Kent Hill Drive and 450 done. And that is on the offing. Construction hopefully will start in a year and a half or so. So we've been able to work there with it. But we have problems with 301. We have problems with 3 there by the White Marsh and the 450 interchanges that we continue to need to work with. You know, we can only be super lobbyists when it comes to that. Now, let's look internal. A lot of the problems that we have on the horizon really deal with the overpopulation of residential units at Melford. You're going to have a lot more cut-through traffic. You're going to have to come up with creative ways to deal with traffic calming. You're going to have to hopefully tweak back and lower the number of housing units that are on Melford, because that additional 2,500 or more cars and trucks that will be on Bel Air Drive and cutting through on Beaverdale, on Buckingham, on Stony Brook and Kent Hill are going to add to the dilemma that we already have. We already have residents who seem to think that stop signs don't mean anything and speed limits are things to challenge, not to be obeyed. So we've got to come up with some creative ways to deal with slowing people down and getting them to stop at stop signs. And I'd like to try and come up with some, look at the possibility of including the faith-based organizations and the civic associations and the youth and recreation leagues in order to come up with a campaign to bring awareness to the people that in your own neighborhoods, you need to look out for one another. We have neighbor watching neighbor, except when they get in the cars, they seem to forget that. So transportation issues are significant. Now, with Melford, the genie is out of the bottle. Until the city council decided to cave and give in on the prohibition of residential there, we did not have this as an issue. And unfortunately, without real thought and deliberation and discussion, especially without input from the public, the decision was made that results in a significant amount of additional traffic, residential traffic that will be coming in here. So I think we need to sit down with the developer and look at tempering the number of units we're talking about. You're talking about 2,500 units in 90 acres. That's over 10% of the city's total housing units are going to go on an area that is about 5% of the total city. So the density in the cities, the density is going to be about 19 to 20 times what it is currently. So there's definitely a challenge, but like I said, we've lost the leverage because the covenants were abandoned. So, I can go on and on. I think transportation, there are many other issues that we do face, many challenges on the public safety aspect of it. As the economy gets better, unfortunately, if you look at the statistics, when you have a very good economy, you have crimes tend to increase. Now that the economy is recovering, there is a concern, especially in the business and in the commercial areas, that you may have an increase in crime that we'll have to deal with. We'll have to ensure that we have adequate resources to deal with it and handle it so that it does not become so bad that it negatively impacts on the city. So that is something. The fact that we are going to the bond market for the combined two-sport facility, in all likelihood will require a 1 to 2 cent increase in tax rate, which is surprising that the current campaign touts the fact that for the last 6 years we've not had a tax increase, but there's no other way to pay the $750 to $1 million annual bond payment without raising taxes. So there are a lot of challenges on the horizon. I think the most significant one is transportation, especially as it relates to in the residential communities of the city, especially the center part, the Kenilworth section, the Buckingham section, Fox Hill, and Somerset. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Well, thank you very much. There are, like I said in my opening comments, there are some issues in the city. There are transportation issues and housing issues and whatever. The way I've approached these from the very beginning is very simple. Put the right people in the room, try to get everybody that has a view at the table. The first project I inherited was Bowie Town Center. Some of you may remember that. When I came on board, the county had already issued grading permits to rebuild what would effectively been the old Landover Mall or the old Annapolis Mall, big box surrounded by an ocean of asphalt. And there was substantial opposition to it in the city. But the reality was no build was not an option. The county had already issued the grading permits, they were free to go. So what was the option left? It was to try to put Simon Corporation, our city staff, and some of the loudest critics we could find in a room together and say, we have to come up with a better idea, and you can't come out of this room until you do. It took a year. And to Simon Corporation's credit, they worked with us over that period of time. Now, the design that came out of it may not be the greatest thing to everybody in the world, but I guarantee you it's light years ahead of what it was proposed to be. And right now, Bowie has been reduced to an adjective because Simon markets that site as the Bowie model across the country. It's been very successful across the country. That same process of putting people at the right table at the right time seems to work. Right down the street here, Marketplace again is coming out of the ashes. How long have we been fussing with trying to get a quality development back there? We met with Berman Corporation, who bought the property with no intention to build. They came to Bowie, I sat down with them and staff, and they said that they were so excited about the response they got, they moved that project up to their number 2 item, right behind the project they're doing in Metro. And since then, we've met with them on a constant basis, and they encountered some challenges in trying to bring a quality high-end grocery to the store. Harris Teeter's coming. But one of the things we found out was when Harris Teeter came in, it kind of broke their bank because they negotiated an incredible contract. So instead of throwing the project away, I sat down with them, I sat down with council and said, how can we work this together? And Berman said, you know, if you could help us out with some financial assistance in maybe knocking down the property, we can keep this thing on the project. And we agreed to do that. The city invested $700,000 in that project. And I think it was the right thing to do. And I told council, you can vote no on this if you want. But it's unlikely we'll be able to put this package together again anytime soon. And if you vote no on this, which nobody probably faults you for, the center will continue to deteriorate. It may very well take down the whole 450 corridor. At the end of the day, council agreed, and we committed to funding. The reality of that site is currently our tax revenue from the Marketplace is about $25 grand a year. When the first half goes up, the tax base goes up to $180,000. So we're going to recover our investment probably in about 3 years. And after that, the site will be there. And it doesn't include any of the tax benefit that comes from the back part of the site. And that's what we do. I do that routinely, meeting with our city officials, our county officials, and our state officials, and our federal officials, in order to get our share of state share taxes, to get our share of highway user funds, to get our share of a lot of it. If you put people in a room together and let people talk through what the issues are, it's amazing how you can find a solution. If you put difficult people in the room that have intelligent but opposite opinions, if you can find one thing that you agree on, you can put them together and you can move them towards a solution. And that's what I found to be successful. And as a result of that, the people that we work with on a routine basis, we have a much better relationship now with everybody than we did when I came on board. When I came on board, we had zero relationship with the business community. We had very strained relationships with the county and the state. One of the first things I learned when I met with the county executive, Wayne Curry at the time, he had a stack of stuff on his desk, and he said, when I went down to meet him, I said, what's that? He said, those are Bowie requests. And I said, well, why are they on your desk? And he said, well, as long as the current machine was there, that's where they're going to stay. So I said, well, we've made a change. So why don't you give us something that we can show some positive movement? And he gave us the Mitchell Road project. And since then, we built on that relationship. I have an incredible relationship with the county executive, with our state delegation, with our federal delegation. You've seen their pictures on my flyers. These are people with whom we have to interact on a daily, regular basis. They have to have some trust and confidence. We have a better relationship now with the business community than we've ever had. One of the things I said when I came on board is I was going to work for a strong, vibrant, multi-generational community. And that meant the residential community has to prosper and the business community has to prosper. What folks forget sometimes is the man that's building a house is buying windows, and he's buying refrigerators, and he's buying concrete, and all of those other industries are working. And that's what keeps the economy moving. And I think if by any objective standard, if you look at where the city was when I came on board, yeah, some people say I'm mired in the past. I'll tell you what a number from the past. When I came on board, the city's tax base was $1 billion. Today, it's almost $7 billion. We have very few local jobs. Today, we have thousands of jobs. And we are building to meet some of the residential needs that we have right now. Now, Mr. Brady obviously doesn't like the residential component that's in Belford, and I understand that. We've had that discussion, we've had that debate. Council decided 6-1 to move forward. One of the things that we're losing sight of is over half of the residential units that are going to go on there are set aside for seniors. One of the biggest holes in our residential donut right now is quality, affordable residential opportunities so that the people that built this community, the people that turned it from a development into a community, can stay here if they want. Now, maybe some people are offended by that. I am not. I think putting senior residences and communities in the city is a positive thing. And that's what I'm going to continue to do. I will work with the residential community, the faith community, all the social civic groups in the city, as I have done. And I think, like I said, by any objective standard, if you look at where we are and where we are now, I think you can say it's been positive.
Thank you. You know, we've been talking about Bowie as it is growing. I know that in the 23 years I've lived here in Bowie, it has grown exponentially. It's grown from a lot of forest land to the Newtown Center and all these restaurants. When we first moved here, I think the best restaurants were the ones in the old Free State Mall. But let's turn now to another matter dealing with three of the most vulnerable populations in this city. Prince George's County and the city of Bowie are probably two of the few counties in the DC metropolitan area that does not have a plan for low-income housing. And many of our low-income residents have a hard time paying mortgage or rent and keeping up their property. What plans do you have to help, or would you have as mayor, to help our low-income families to find a place to live in Bowie that they could afford and still be able to maintain? Let's begin with you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Clearly, it's a challenge. Some of the things we have done in the past, I mean, we've brought in senior assisted living. Pin Oak is a great example of that, where people are built when they're willing to pay. Clearly, we need more opportunities like that, and we're going to pursue it. The construction, as I understand it, the residential component in Alfred also includes a range of costs of homes and housing. The challenge some of these things this presents is you want to bring people together and you want to accomplish a great many things, and there is a legitimate need for these things. I was at Willows and Evergreen within the last month, and I'm talking to people that are in their 70s and 80s and 90s that are living on very fixed incomes and have very serious challenges. The problem is whichever direction we go, it's sort of like throwing that pebble in a pond, everything ripples beyond that. Somebody wanted to know if we could put a cap on rents. And I said, first off, we don't have lawful authority to do that. That would be a state option. But there is a repercussion to that too, and that is if you do that without careful thought, what it does is it inhibits the potential addition of any more facilities. Because if you're going to build a facility and you have lots of options about where to go, you might want to, the taxes or the regulatory process in a given community could affect that decision. There are not a lot of issues, a lot of opportunities for government to have an active role in terms of funding and direct subsidies, but there are ways that you can put people together. The faith community here is incredible. If you look at what the faith community does, what the food pantries do, and what the individual churches do, there's a great source of a sense of commitment and a sense of charity in this city that I'm proud to say is amazing. I talk to mayors and people all across the state, and when they look at Bowie and they say, look what you guys achieved over there. And it is because, the people in this community are willing to look at issues and are willing to get their hands in the pile and do what has to be done. Like I said earlier, whether it's a storm emergency or a financial collapse or people that have trouble, people are willing to jump in and try to help. And that's a treasure that you don't find in a lot of communities. So my sense is do what we've done successfully. Bring people together. Try to look at it as realistically as we can. try not to raise unrealistic expectations for people. I mean, I could easily go over to some of the senior facilities and say, look, I'm going to guarantee that you're going to get money from the city to do this and do that. A, that's not fair to them, because I don't know that it's a possibility. And two, the question you have to do is that money has to come from somewhere. So you either reduce another service or you raise taxes. And there may be legitimate decisions to make, and it may be a legitimate priority. But you have to do that in a serious, objective, public debate.
Thank you. Mr. Brady.
It is definitely a challenge to ensure that everyone, no matter what their economic status in life, has the ability to have affordable housing, have the resources to have adequate food, so they don't go starving and what have you. So in today's society, we have too many people, I think, living below the poverty level. And it is a major, significant issue in the metropolitan Washington region. I know COG and counties and the states are looking at it, and the city has a very limited role in what it can do. The mayor was right with regard to Pin Oak. It's one example where we've had federally subsidized housing come in, which is targeting low income, the ability for people with low income to have affordable housing and what have you. Part of the problem we have in the city of Bowie is, for the most part, it is developed. There aren't a lot of opportunities in the city. There are some in the surrounding area. You've got Carrington to the south that is going to be a significant development that has a major residential component. There are opportunities there, and it's a matter of convincing the developers that it is in their best interest to have a wide range of housing availability to the public so that it can meet the needs of the community. The mayor mentioned about rent control. And when the citizens came to us a year and a half ago, they were emphatic that they weren't looking for rent control, but they were looking for an assistance in some form. So that, even the people that are in need realize that it's not in their best interest, because with rent control typically comes the lack of the resources necessary to maintain the buildings in the future, and so it's a control. So that they weren't asking for that. But the unfortunate thing is that we had a report, I don't think we had any follow-up meetings and discussions publicly on it, and it's languishing, growing dust on a shelf. So, I think we've disappointed the community. Not the issue of generating expectations that are beyond what is reasonable, but rather I think we need to have a dialogue so we can figure out what is in the realm of possibilities, and the city needs to step forward and do that. With regard, we keep coming back to Melford, with regard to Melford, the big problem with Melford, with any residential over there, is that it's in an isolated island, if you will, in a sea surrounded by employment and major roads. And I'm not certain seniors want to be over there if they can't get to their doctor's appointments, if they can't get to their shopping center to get their groceries, if they can't get to CVS to get their prescriptions filled and what have you. It doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense to have them isolated. It's not easily accessible even by foot or by bikes, so it is highly separated. So it doesn't make sense to have senior over there. It doesn't make sense to really have any, definitely for low-income people, because they quite often are in need of major transportation, which won't be going over there either. So it sounds good. It's a great thing you can put on a piece of campaign literature and send out. It's really not conceivable that it is a reasonable thing to expect to occur. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the mayor also hinted at this, dealing with our senior citizens. This thing dealing with low-income housing also applies to our senior citizens who are operating on fixed incomes, many of them very low incomes. What plans, as mayor, would you have to assist these senior citizens in paying their rent? Mr. Brady, let's start with you.
Well, it clearly is a pressing need for many. And I think the city needs to look at how it can best do that and leverage some of our own tax dollars to get county and state, possibly federal grant monies. And I know Jesse Buggs, our grant coordinator, is already looking at that, trying to develop a program that can work in addressing it. Now, one of the interesting things that when I talked to him a couple of weeks ago about this issue, he pointed out to me, he said, if these seniors are having problems paying their rent, that means they're also having problems paying for their food, and they're having problems paying for their medical, and they're having problems for, and the list went on and on and on. So that the rent aspect, the cost of living aspect is just a small component, and I think we need to look at identifying partners that we can bring in, whether it's private philanthropist type organizations that can help, or the state and the county, to partner with us in a program that would be set up to assist them. Now, and before we set up any program, I think we need to do a little more research and define what the scope of the problem is. How can they be assisted, from their perspective, and see how it fits into the city's goal. And like I said, the biggest thing we can do is leverage opportunities with our other partners in government to step forward and address their problems and help them out.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Thanks again for the question. One thing, to try to put this in perspective, about 25% of the city's population now is over 65. About 25% of our population is under 25. So you can see where the spread is in the city. If you look at what the city has done with reaching out and to federal and state officials in terms of getting grant monies and stuff that can go to projects, almost all of that goes to seniors, and particularly seniors in need. If you've been to Huntington recently, you've seen some of the efforts that have gone down there for housing rehabilitation, for everything from energy efficiency in their homes, to replacing roofs, to replacing appliances, and working with civic groups like Christmas in April that go back and rehab housing and stuff. And we try to put that stuff together and leverage whatever influence we might have as an individual in the city. We do work with other communities, we do work with other levels of government to try to do that. We've tried to be as effective as we can, but the reality is the city does have serious limitations on where we can go, where we can use city tax money and that sort of thing. But I think the evidence of what we've done so far strongly suggests a willing commitment to work with people and work with groups and to try to make life as effective and as good for people as we possibly can. There's no perfect solution, and as you that have worked with people in need understand that it's one thing to fix the emergency, and then you have another problem trying to follow up. Not long ago, we had an unexpected emergency over at one of the senior facilities, I think it was the Evergreen facility, where they were flooded. And we were faced with the option, where are we going to put these people for a couple of days? And the city stepped up and with, I think a couple of community groups came forward, and we put enough funding together to put those people up in a hotel for a couple of 3 days. Because a lot of them have no other family. I talked to a lady over there who was 80 years old. She was having trouble with her, she's a retired government worker, so with her pension and with her Social Security, it pays for her room and her electricity and a couple of other things. But at the end of that, it's gone. And she has no family, to call back on. And I think that's stereotypical of some of the conditions. But as much as your heart reaches out for some of you, you have to understand there's some limitations to what we can do. We can bring the food pantry to bear. We can do some kind of supplemental services. We can work with the other government agencies and the federal government to try to secure additional grants and stuff that we will channel for these people. And I think everything that we have been able to do has been effective. Can we do more? Certainly. Are these people, some of these people vulnerable? Yes. Now understand, everybody in the city over 65 is not in a need situation. So you have to look at the total population and try to figure out where the greatest need is, where the greatest priority is, and try to work with that. And do that, we work with you folks here at St. Matt's and with the food pantry and others to try to channel those opportunities. There is just no simple solution, but it's a problem that's going to be with us for a long time.
Thank you. I know St. Matthew's is a big supporter of the food pantry and other programs like that. But
what's interesting is that you see this pantry now, some of the folks that have been contributing for years are up there now getting assistance. So it's a cycle with that facility. And if that facility wasn't here, I should have think that would happen.
St. Matthew's has also just recently, I guess in the past 6 months, started looking into another area. That is the area of homelessness. We've established a program. We're working with a couple of staff members from the county on trying to help the homeless. We want to focus on Bowie, but we are going out right now throughout the county in helping. Bowie doesn't have the degree of homelessness as the rest of Prince George's County, but we do have the homeless out there, and many of them are quite obvious. Some of them are camping out in the woods and the like. As long as they're not hurting anything or anybody, we have no problems with trying to help them. The question here is, what assistance can the city of Bowie offer the homeless? Because right now, the county just started a program back in spring, I believe. They have 2 staff members who check several times during the week on various homeless communities in the county. One of them, however, is now running warm nights, so he's off the homeless list in this particular respect. But what can the city offer? What assistance can the city offer the homeless? And we'll start with Mr. Brady, if you will.
Okay. It is an issue in the region, as I said, the last question that you asked us. And there are other levels of government that are looking at it. The city, though, has we had an individual, I think, last Christmas last year, who at Bowie Town Center was repeatedly reported being found in the middle, cold nights, sleeping on a bench and what have you. We had our police talk to them. We tried to line them up and what have you, but they absolutely refused any assistance. So, if people absolutely refuse what you're offering in assistance and generosity, what have you, there's not much you can do. It's a choice that they make. But for many, though, it's not a choice that they make. They would prefer to have something. And I think the key is to have a program that can identify those. And I think our police department and our other, like public works and what have you, need to be the eyes of the city so we can identify it. We need to set up and have a structure to respond to people who call in. And either partner with the churches and the faith-based communities that may have some resources, check with the county because they do have some facilities in the area, and other private sector in order to identify places that can accommodate, provide for housing. And with the housing issue, you really have 2 separate ones. You have long-term housing problems that, you have individuals and families that are in need of housing because they've been evicted or they can't make their mortgage payment, what have you. But then you also have a bigger issue that when the temperatures drop down into the freezing or sub-freezing, what have you, you want to make sure that people are out of that and into a warm place where they can get some food, get rest, and be warm, clean up, and what have you. So you have 2 different issues here. One's more critical, the latter being the most critical, in order to ensure that the health and safety of the individuals that are outside is provided for whenever the weather gets very bad. There are limited opportunities what the city can do as far as its immediate resources. We had the issue with the Evergreen where we were able to put people up for a short time because of a major break in the water there. But when it comes to the homeless, I think it really is the city needs to work with the various nonprofits and faith-based communities in the city in order to address that need.
Thank you, Mr. Bader.
Thank you. The homeless issue really falls in a couple of 3 different parts. A number of the people that are homeless in the county clearly extends from a financial problem. Another component of this, one that's often overlooked, is that a lot of the people that are in these homeless conditions either have some kind of addiction problem, either it's an alcohol or a drug addiction or whatever. Those folks actually have some opportunity. We work with youth and family services at the city level and with the community to try to provide some redirection for people in that regard. Just this past 2 weeks, we attended a grand reopening of the Champs facility up on 197 that is offering incredible services to, in this case, mostly men that are fighting alcohol addiction. And they're taking them out of a homeless situation and putting them in a rehabilitation center that has an incredible success record. And I think there's a role there for us to play in that. I don't know how defined that role can be, It may be something as simple as trying to help other groups and raising money for them and helping in that regard. It may be in helping them negotiate through the morass of county and state regulations as they go through challenges to keep the place open. But homelessness is, as tragic as it is, it's a case where we have to bring the city, county, and state primarily funding and resources together. There are some federal funding and resources that we can help with. The warm night program that you need, that the churches offer, has been incredible. It provides refuge for people that won't go anywhere else. Mr. Brady's absolutely right. I mean, I've talked to some of these folks that are out on the street, and the police will go by and ask them to go to different places, and they adamantly refuse. There were two ladies that lived somewhere in and around town center. They appear to be rational, they appear to be normal, but they're homeless, but they refuse any services whatsoever. And unless you want to go to some draconian take custodial situation, you know, there's not a lot that you can do in that regard. We can work with the communities and perhaps increasing opportunities like warm nights and whatever. And we can work with groups to deal with addiction. It's interesting that the state has now launched some incredibly new and effective addiction resource funding to deal with people with hardcore drug addiction, particularly with heroin epidemic that's taken over in the state realm. It's a matter of trying to define the problem, define the priorities of the problem, see where help can work, see where help is going to be revived. Try to work with the faith community, the business community, and the civic communities to try to leverage those activities together so that we can get literally the biggest bang for the buck. It's a problem that's not going to go in a city that is basically affluent, as is Bowie. I mean, median income in the city is well over $60,000 a year, which puts you at the top of the state. So we are a strong, affluent community. It doesn't mean that we don't have people that are unemployed or underemployed or facing homelessness with a check that may not come in the next week. So it's a matter of being aware of the problem, working with the facilities and the organization that can immediately jump into action and can bring resources to bear. Maybe our role could be, you know, trying to reach out to the various communities in the city to try to channel funding to different sources. The challenge for using city money to think, then you get into the whole realm of accounting and auditing and all of those other things. And you start, you know, as government does, you lose the focus and you stop the efforts that you guys can do so much more effectively than do we.
The St. Matthew's program is just beginning. We're trying to find our way where we can fit into it. We're hoping we can turn it into an interfaith community type of program, but a lot of it has to do with being able to get out there. And the county only has 2 people dealing with it, and really there's not much. So we're trying to get involved with that. Those are the only other questions I have. Are there any in the audience? Mr. Donnison.
While we're on that subject, we have Mr. Summerlot, isn't it?
Mr. Summerlot came to our men's breakfast.
Came to speak to us on just this subject, and I'm not sure exactly what his title is, other than, you know, outreach. And one of the things that he had indicated that he was most successful with was just getting out and meeting these people.
Meeting them?
Yes, actually meeting them, sitting with them, finding out, listening to them. And, you know, the one question I asked him was, you know, if there are facilities, why are these people reluctant to go to the facilities? And they said because they fear for loss of all of their earthly goods. Maybe they're moving them around in a shopping cart. I don't know. But the point is that was one of the things he said, because you get stolen blind when you go to one of these facilities.
We've heard that from people. You know, I don't want to go to facilities because I have a limited amount of resources, a limited amount of assets, and it's possible that I could lose them there. We've also heard from people that have still a strong sense of personal conviction. The 2 ladies I talked to, by all accounts, you know, they have resources, but they're bound and determined they're not going to take any assistance from anyone. And I'm sure you've met with folks.
Well,
that
pride
have
is
the
a
same-
wonderful thing.
Yeah, it is, but at some point, you have to say yes. Sometimes you have to talk to people that may be able to provide a different way. And I don't know what the solution is going to be, but we have reached out to those folks. We have sat down and talked to them. We try to bring either the police with us or social workers or whatever. And the range of responses that you get are as incredible as you suggest. As I said, they range from, I'm not going to take any help from anybody, or I just want to be left alone. I don't trust the government to do anything, and if I go over there, I'm going to lose my head. So you have to overcome that resistance in the first place. And some of the folks that do that, some of the social workers that are attached to these organizations, have incredible success in trying to bridge that gap. And they should be congratulated. But as you know now, the weather's going to turn cold, not far from now, and we're going to be faced with the same situations again. We'll have people out. County routinely goes out every night when the weather drops, and state people are available. And they do what they can, but not everyone's willing to do that. Now, the other part of the equation is sometimes when you see the homeless person on television, you see it as a middle-aged or older male. But if you look at the homeless population, a lot of them are children. And a lot of them are women single women with children. So they require not only immediate place of refuge, they have to have some kind of long-term means to get back on their feet. And that requires a lot of multi-level government operation.
You led right into a point that I would like to make.
Well, I'm glad I did that.
I come from a community in St. Louis County, Missouri. It happens to be one of the 173 communities that make up St. Louis County. In the town where I live, which happens to have a decreasing population, it's down to about 10,000 people. Nonetheless, in that community, they have discovered just what you said. They have a bunch of disenfranchised teenagers that were basically homeless, living on the street, had no family to support them, and that just leads to bad things in a number of different ways. Bowie High School is about the size of the high school that I attended. I would bet, probably my life savings, that there are kids at Bowie High School who are homeless. And the community that I came from, recognizing this, had a restaurant in town called Joe's Place. Joe's Place was just a hamburger joint, but the kids would congregate there after school. And Joe would help them. He would help them do their homework, things like that. Now, Joe's Place has evolved into literally a home for disenfranchised youth. They have one for boys, they're working on one for girls. And they have live-in house parents that perform all of the functions that biological parents should but don't, or aren't in the picture. And I'm saying that in a town of 60,000 people, surely we could have a community supported and funded facility that would take care of those two groups of people, disenfranchised boys, disenfranchised girls.
Sure. I think you're right on that. We need to structure something that will meet the needs of those that are most in a position to be lost from society, if you will. Today, I remember growing up, being the Army brat, we moved around until I was in 6th grade, and I'd go palling around with my cousin who'd never been out of my hometown until he joined the Navy at age 19. And by the time we get back to my uncle's place, there'd already be a phone call, somebody telling my uncle what my cousin had done. And this is in a town that's about this size. So, everyone looked out for everyone else, and I think we need to get back to that. That was 40 years ago, so I think we need to get back to that. And I think the city has the ability to play a role. Now, there are a lot of components that you have to deal with. You have to deal with the ability to identify those people. identify whether they're youth, as the mayor said, probably one of the largest numbers, percentage-wise, of people who are homeless are women with children that are homeless. So we need to be able to identify them, define what their needs are, and figure out how it is we can step forward and provide for that. And it doesn't need to be the government by itself. It needs to be a partnership with, because it'll be a wide spectrum of what their needs are, whether it's housing, food, whether it's clothing, educational assistance, what have you, for the kids. Because there's no reason for them to suffer because their mother or father or parents are in an economic jam. They clearly shouldn't suffer. So we need to do something, and the last organization to step forward to do all of those things should not be the government. The government has a role, but I think it needs to be more of a community-based response to it. The churches, the youth organizations, the schools, the library, all of those that have a part to play in the solution need to be coordinated in order to step forward and do it. And maybe a bigger role for the city, and a larger share for the city, would be in helping with that coordination, especially with other levels of government, to step forward and provide the necessary thing. And then whenever you do have the outreach, when you do identify people, one of the probably significant things is how you approach them. And it goes to that line issue that you were talking about. Some people won't take any assistance. Some people, depends on how you approach them. If they think you're looking down on them because of their economic plight, you're never going to convince them to accept it. So the people who are identifying, the people who are reaching out, making that first contact, need to be trained in how to do it and do it properly. Otherwise, you're going to alienate them from the get-go whenever you end up meeting with them. Put your hand out, stretch your hand out to shake theirs and greet them and say, we're here to help you. If you make them feel uncomfortable, they're going to react negatively. We don't want that. So there is a role for making sure those that are making initial contact with these individuals do it in a positive, proactive way that can convince them that if we are sincere and honest and truly wanting to help them, there's no other thing. Thank you.
Thank you. I think clearly the faith community is a lot of things to take a lead in these kinds of things. The city can do a lot of things, but in order to continue and follow and provide that safety and that kind of open support thing that where they don't feel threatened by a government agency, this may sound unfair, but it's going to fall in the faith community. It's basically your role. You provide for the support for all of us that attend your services and participate fully, but it's part of our obligation as a people, Christian, whatever, to continue to do that, and you're going to have to do the leadership. I just recall there are some occasions where people in Bowie have just come up. I'm just sitting here, it was a couple of years ago, I remember working with a young kid who wasn't 12 or 14 years old, looked up in the I section. You may remember this, where she went and got suitcases. She went around collecting suitcases for children, particularly that were homeless. Because she didn't realize, like a lot of people didn't realize, some of these people were just carrying all their possessions around in a bag. They had never seen a suitcase. And so it went from providing suitcases to the children to providing clothing for children and trying to prevent, and it came from one child to another child. It was almost like a universal response there that chipped away at that fear or that concern or that reluctance to embrace the help. So those things work. But again, I think the drive for that is going to primarily come from the faith community. And I mean, I'm sure both of us here would be glad to stand shoulder to shoulder with you and work on those kind of issues. But like I say, there are certain things that the city can do, some grant proposals and stuff, but we are severely limited in some of the direct things we do. And it's all a matter of, sometimes it's a matter of bringing light to the problem. If you don't know that there's a homeless problem, it doesn't cross your mind. It doesn't mean you're evil. It doesn't mean you're indifferent. It means you don't know. So sometimes it's a matter of bringing that out to the public and working with the community. And therein lies, again, the advantage of building relationships with communities and with other governments so that we can sit down and deal on a first-name basis with people, say, for sure, Hathaway helped us out. I spoke to a group of people the other night from the ARC group, and they presented a problem to me that I hadn't quite frankly anticipated. The new higher wage program that has a lot of great things going for it, is going to cripple them. They're looking at spending about $2 million a year more than they have. You know, everybody agrees that, you know, that there's a benefit to raising minimum wage and doing services. But there's a direct impact for this man's service capacity. And so I've suggested that we, you know, put him in a room with the right people. Now I understand he's reached out to some competent legal assistants that is going to try to work with the county to try to find out if there's some way, maybe it might be something as simple as an exemption from the law for these kinds of activities. I don't know what it'll be, but it was another avenue or another part of this problem that, quite frankly, I had not considered. And, you know, you stand there talking to somebody at one event when this problem comes up, and that's how they ultimately get resolved.
Thank you. Any other question over here?
Yes, actually, I have two questions, both of them for both candidates. And one of mine is something similar to what we've been talking about, and that is dealing with the homeless. It seems that we've been talking about faith-based groups and getting together people in order to help. My thought is, has anyone thought about just the Bowie itself, the government, finding a building, providing a building, cleaning it up, and getting into partnership with someone else in order to man it and do whatever else, but Bowie just simply clean up the building and get it straightened out first. And then what are the other groups as they come into that room, as the mayor was talking about, work alone and do the rest of the work? Has anyone thought about that idea?
I don't know if we've considered that particular option. There may be something to consider. Maybe, depending on whether it's a privately owned or government-owned facility, there may be an opportunity for the city to do something like what you suggest. But the care and operation of the program obviously would probably have to be done privately. Right. And it might have, you know, might be a nonprofit, maybe a brand new nonprofit. You know, the Bowie Clergy Association has over the years done services like that. It's a creative approach. Again, if you can put multiple people in a room together, put smart people in a room together, say, here's the problem. What is the best way to do it? Like I said, sometimes, you know, I go back to the example I told you with the town center. I mean, we were faced with a real problem there. And what I recall doing at that time was just sitting down with all the people. You're going in this room, and you can't come out until you have a better idea. And maybe that's the same kind of thing. Maybe we can lean on some folks. Maybe we can cajole some people. Maybe we can have a broader, more intimate relationship with the faith community. But every time we walk down that line, you know, there's going to be a bubble. Because while I venture to say that 100% of the people in this room agree that that's a right and reasonable and legitimate responsibility to do, I guarantee you that as soon as you move forward there'll be a group of people who come up there and say, you can't do that. So I divide the world into two groups. There's an obstacle to overcome group, and there's you can't do that because group. And you have to deal with this group somehow.
I thought you divided it into two groups, those that live in Bowie and those.
I do that already.
So now we're down to 4 groups, or no, just kidding. No, but following along that, you know, I think the role of the city could easily be to be the catalyst for that. We have the ability to basically identify the potential sites that could be receptors for this. And we know who owns the properties and what have you, and we could partner with either the real estate community or the business community in order to move that forward. So I really think it's a novel approach and maybe worth looking at to come up with a way to move forward. But like the mayor said, I think the program probably would be borne by the private sector, not by the government, but the government has a role to help move it in that direction. So I see that as the role of the city.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Any other questions or?
I'm sorry, my second.
Oh, you're saying that? Yeah,
Yes,
sorry.
yes. My second question basically was that we had a debate, and there were several people that had come after me after and they asked me the same question. I always ask, why did you ask me then? Basically, the question is, on the city's website, it shows a variety of people and everything, but a lot of people of color, no matter which way they were basically saying it didn't reflect Bowie as it is now. And so they were wondering why not, and if it could be changed.
I'll tell you that, I'll look at the website when I go home. If that's the case, we can sort of look at it. But I think if you look at where the city had been and where it is now in terms of its inclusiveness, again, I don't know that you could find a city that's stronger, more diverse, and most family-friendly than in Bowie. I mean, the reality is one thing. I mean, if the website shows something else, I mean, that's a fixable condition. And I think it should reflect, the strengths of the city. But I say, I don't think you can go to a community anywhere in this region and not see the strengths of this. I mean, I remember little things that have been done over the last, few years. I remember the Sunday concerts at Allen Pond. It was kind of like the same kind of milquetoast thing. You go down there now, one Sunday it'll be rock and roll, the next week it'll be gospel, the next week it'll be a military band, the next week, it'll be some country for some of those old folks. And then it'll be, it's a new one. So there's an incredible range, and we've tried to do that. We've set up a diversity committee to look at issues, to say, where are we strong, where can we continue to build on that, and is there a challenge for it? Quite frankly, this is something we can look at, and that seems to be imminently fixable.
To follow on that, this is not the first time we've heard that criticism, and in the past we've looked at it. The mayor referenced the music performance at Sunday Sunset concert. We also had the same criticism with Bowie Fest and others, where we were always hiring the same bands, predominantly white bands that were playing, and we've adjusted that over the years. We have different organizations, different groups that come in now to perform. So we try and be broad in this type of music that we provide in those. We previously had a criticism about the website, and I thought the diversity committee, which I appreciate you referenced that, it was a committee that I got started on the city council, and I appreciate council's support to do that. But we previously had looked at that, so I'm surprised it has come up again. So it's something that we would clearly task the diversity committee to look at once again. And it may be that we corrected it, and over time, not necessarily an intended bias, but it may be that the pictures they collect are the typical ones that someone may collect, one person may collect, and they end up getting on that isn't, if you're not thinking, can it be misconstrued, you may not perceive the fact that someone else looking at it might think totally negative about it. So it's clearly something we can look at, and it could be something that can be fairly quickly corrected. In fact, that is true. So I appreciate you bringing that forward. And the diversity committee, I think, will immediately look at that.
Okay. Any further questions?
I have one. Thank you both for coming this evening. In just 2 days, the community will vote to end this election one way or the other. And the two of you have sat together for 18 years. And on over 90% of the votes, as I would count them, you've agreed. On very few instances, which several of you have highlighted in the answer to these questions, you've disagreed. But looking ahead at the next 4 years, how do you see yourself? The major contrast between the two of you that you offer to the city as the basis for your leadership for the next 4 years. How do you see that you'll be different from what Dennis would do, Fred? Dennis, how do you see you would be different from what Fred would do in the next 4 years? Because clearly, at least in the next 4 years, one of you will not be present. To balance out.
That's why I tell people it's better than saying it than review.
I thought you started.
I'll go first. I think, Dennis and I have known each other for a long time. Matter of fact, when I left the council, Dennis and Kathy came over to my house because he had expressed an interest in running for city council. I did everything I could to dissuade him. I said, it's going to be a long term, and you don't understand what the time commitments are. But if you want to do it, I'll support you long term. I'll do what I can to get you elected. And we work together a lot. We do vote on elections. We have some differences of opinions on issues. I've always tried to keep those differences of opinions as simple as possible. You don't see us, like a lot of councils, you don't see a lot of huffing and puffing and arguing in the council meeting. I mean, clearly we have a different view on the business community, we have a different view on the city's role in some activities. You know, he's obviously a stronger opponent or supporter for an animal shelter than was I. But I've always tried to keep those differences apart, not personal. Just say, we can agree to disagree. And the point is to do that. I learned a long time ago, I spent 3 years of my life when I was on the police department. I was the head of the Special Operations Division. I handled every barricade and hostage situation in this county for 3 years. I learned that one thing early on. When you go to the scene, the first thing you do is you stabilize things. You try to find one thing you can agree with the guy that's holding a gun to somebody's head. And you try to do it peacefully. There is no room there for anger. There is no room there for emotion. And that's a lesson that you learn. And that's the lesson I brought to this process. If you come to any of our meetings, you will never hear me refer to anybody from the council other than by name, by title. We go out of our way, to make sure that it's a formal process. The meeting starts promptly at 8 o'clock, and we move them right through the agenda. I have a fixation on getting the agenda started, keeping it moving, and making a decision, and then moving to the next thing. I think, quite frankly, that's a healthy process, and that's what I will continue to do. We agree on far more things than we disagree on. Sometimes the things we disagree on get magnified. And I guess that's not unlike anything else in the political process. You watch what's going on television now with the national campaigns. I'm just amazed at anything that's done. I ask people candidly. I have a lot of friends down on Capitol Hill. And I ask people right now, tell me who the state's from. Hard to find. Because people sit there and they want to do it, they just want to make points. And it's hard to get things done. I have spent all the time I've been there trying to get a solid agenda, keep things moving, and keep the city moving. And I think, by almost any effective standard, I think we've achieved a lot. And it's because of having that openness and that willingness to let everybody have their say, come to a decision. And if the decision is different than mine, I'll live with it. But like I say, if you go back over the big issues in the city, almost all of them are 706 one time decision. And so that means there's room for disagreement, but you don't have to be disagreeable.
As an observer of both you, Gary, and Fred, with regards to you went on talking about running the meeting, and to be honest with you, both of you did the same thing, and I think if I am successful, I will continue that same thing, because there is something to be said about the process, and it has served us well probably from the inception of when we first started. So, I mean, as far as running the meetings and the emphasis and what have you, I think you're right when you're talking about 90% of our votes were in line with each other, but we were probably in line with the other 5 members of council too. So that it oftentimes ended up being, when you're talking about adopting an ordinance, everyone agrees on. When you're talking about adopting the budget, I don't think we've ever, the 22 budgets I've had, I don't think there's ever been a dissenting vote. You go back a little further than Gary does. So I don't believe, for the big items, there are subtle distinctions, and it, as far as the next council is concerned, I think the distinction is, my concern, falling back to a couple of differences that we've had, it goes to whether we are open and transparent or whether we are not. And I think the Melford is a prime example of that, where I think the council dropped the ball with transparency and with keeping the public informed and involving the public in the thought process and the decision-making process that went to our giving up on the residential component. So that's the distinction that I would see. It's a subtle one, but I think that probably, in a nutshell, defines the differences that I bring to the next council. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much. And we'll go ahead and call it quits. Okay, Mr. Newland.
As long as we've gone back full circle to revisit Melford, the statement was made earlier that the genie's out of that bottle. Maybe not. We have a court hearing on Friday about the legality of the decision that has been made. And I'll be there because I have been, a staunch, supporter of transparency. And I'm not sure how much transparency we've had, because we've had 4 hearings that I know of, probably many more meetings behind the scenes. And at least 2 of those hearings, I personally spent, along with quite a few other people from the city of Bowie. Right offhand, I can't remember a single person that stood in support of the Melford project as it's been laid out. There have been a lot of people that stood in opposition. And after all of those hearings, it's almost like the railroad train went through with the whistle blowing loud and clear, because nobody on the city council listened to their citizens, and we went ahead and supported, a priori, what the developer was proposing. Makes absolutely no sense. And in particular, I took issue with their transportation, consultant, because he kept telling me, well, our plan meets the county standards. And I said, for what? Roadways are parking lots, because that's what we really have. We have a Route 3 parking lot that's full every morning and every night, and a lot of times during the day. And anyone who doesn't live in South Bowie that is affected by it personally knows that. And I just can't understand how we can get behind this thing and just say, hey, let's go for it. There is even a master plan which has been ignored, because at one point there were additional options for handling traffic going in and out of Melford. Ripped right out of the master plan because it didn't apply, because we weren't putting 2,500 units of housing in there. We are now putting 2,500 units of housing in there, and there's no place for those people to gather. They're just going to sit there and stew in their own juice. And we are going to live with the outflow from Melford and the inflow to Melford. It just absolutely doesn't make an ounce of sense.
All right, let me respectfully disagree. I'll tell you what my thoughts.
6-1, you're going to.
It was a 6-1 vote. Okay, we'll get there. But Melford has gone through an evolution. Some of you may have heard it before our time. One time it was the Maryland University Science and Tech Center. They had grand plans to make it into a replica of California site or the North Carolina site. It didn't work. It didn't come to pass. It went through 4, 5, 6 iterations of ownership. Went down through the dumper back in the 70s and 80s when the real estate thing went. And then it changed ownership a couple of times since then. St. Johnson came in a number of years ago. And quite frankly, it sparked a big fight within the city. Did you recall the city stood up for a long time by itself? Because the county changed the zoning of the property. And the city went back through the court process. We went all the way to the Court of Appeals, and we ultimately won that case and said that the covenants on the property trumped the county zoning. And the Court of Appeals agreed with this. So that kind of ended that whole process. If you recall, they wanted to put thousands of townhouses on the property and just do away with everything. As time went on, they built those 2 Class A office buildings on the front. And they were making some progress. Nothing's been built over there since 05 or 06. So it's been kind of flat. There are a lot of facilities over there. There's an incredible array of medical services and nuclear medicine and all those things that are over there now that have made our life a lot better. They came in after that battle was over and said, we'd like to respectfully ask you to consider an alternative. we'd like to take one of the pods and look at maybe looking at some kind of a mixed use so that the facility won't be a drive there in the morning and drive home at night. Maybe make it a more around the clock facility. Maybe we could introduce some retail, maybe we could introduce some residential. And they came in with 2 or 3 plans. And we had a series of hearings on those plans. We had a series of hearings that led up to whether we were going to agree to change the covenants or not. And we ultimately, the council ultimately agreed to change the covenants as long as the city maintained absolute control of what it looked like, what the traffic patterns were, with, you know, how the buildings were arrayed and all of that. And then they came in with a plan. And the plan was, you know, let's look at this frame and let's put in a vision that mixes some residential, some at-market residential, some senior residential, some retail, and some office. I thought the plan worked. You know, I looked at it, the plan looks great. There is a cap on transportation that comes out of that site, no matter how it's developed. There's a cap that says the maximum number of cars that can come in and go out are set by law, whether it's developed or it's intentionally or in business. So that cap is not going to be extended. It's not going to be exceeded. I agree that there's going to be some adjustments to, you know, people drive in and out of there, but that's what they said on every change we've made. I mean, I remember coming into the city years ago when nobody wanted anything. But we looked at that. One option was to say no. That's the easy answer. That would have been probably the most politically savvy thing to do. Let me just say no. Let's let the project die. And the project was teetering on whether it was going to survive or not. And, you know, you can take issue with the decision. I respect your disagreement with me. But I thought long and hard about this. We had a number of hearings on the covenant change, and then we had a number of hearings on what the design and the plan. And there are differences of opinions on what it be. They've hired a world-class environmental guy to come in and take a look at how it's being built, how it impacts the river, and all those other things. So we've tried to do everything we could, as sensibly as we could, without trying to get so messy that we're going to let the project fail. Right now, the project's been there for 30 years. I think at the end of the day, that the change makes sense. I think it adds to the community. That one pod, now you may disagree with me on this analysis, that one pod is $500 million of new tax base for the city. One of the things we've been able to do over recent years is shift some of the responsibility for the tax obligation from residential to business and other things. This provides us another opportunity to do that as well. $500 million is probably equivalent to 2,500, 3,000 houses in the city in terms of their tax contribution. So I recognize the difference of opinion, but I would disagree with you completely when it comes to saying this was not a transparent thing. It was a public event. We had hearing after hearing. We had committee people look at it, and there was no universal agreement. I agree with it. Nobody just said this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, or whatever the greatest thing was before sliced bread. At the end of the day, I thought it was a decent option pursuit. I still think that was the right decision. And as you said, it was a 6-1 decision in the council. So I respect your disagreement, and I honor your approach to it. But I will tell you this, I have a lot of search on that. I agree with the decision. And that may put me at odds with you, but I will tell you the same thing I told people from the very beginning. What you see is what you get. And I won't lie to you. I won't raise false expectations. I will look you in the face and say, I respect your opinion here, but I disagree with you. Now, how you respond to that is out of my control. But like I say, at the end of the day, I think it's the right decision.
The reference to the genie in the bottle was due to the fact that as long as the covenant said no residential, there would not be residential. The mayor said we fought in court, the court upheld that, the legitimacy that St. John's Property tried to argue that that's an antiquated item in our covenants, and therefore it should be thrown out of the courts, and the courts disagreed with that. The issue with regards to the public is, I would disagree, because on January 5th of 13, when Councilwoman Diane Plyngan made the motion to direct staff to work with the owner of the property, St. John Properties, to develop covenants that would allow housing. When that order went to staff, that was a decision without any public input to change the covenants. Now, officially, we didn't change the covenants. We didn't adopt the new covenants until April, I believe, that year. In actuality, all of the public, the city committee hearings that the mayor was referencing, actually it's a single combined city hearing, and that was the result of what I pushed for, because I was troubled by the fact that we had not had any public discussion, public debate, and there was no stakeholder meeting that would like to discuss this. Matter of fact, we spent quite a bit of time in executive session and trading emails coming up with a decision to do that. So that was very troubling. With regards to their vision, I'm not an economist. I'm an engineer. I'm a problem solver. I like to analyze things. Now, their economist came forward and presented a comparison of this site as they're proposed to Kings Farm in Rockville, Meadow Lawn in Columbia, and Kentlands. And the only reason he compared them to those three was they're comparable in size. They're all about 200 acres. And basically his decision was, since they're comparable in size, that the vision is comparable and it will work. And where he missed, in my belief, in looking at it, analyzing it, because I'm very familiar with Kentlands. In the introduction, it said that I spent the last 23 years in Gaithersburg, which is right adjacent, at Niston, Gaithersburg. I was within a mile or two of Kentlands, and I'm very familiar with that. And it's a great community. Kent Farms is on 355 near the Shady Grove Metro, and I'm very familiar with that area and what have you. And it is a excellent development. I'm not at all familiar with Meadow Lawn and Columbia, but the three things that were common with all those, or the things that were common with all three of those, is the fact that, one, they were surrounded by or abutted by several major roads. In Kentlands, you had 3 of the 4 boundaries were major roads. Prince Orchard Boulevard, Great Seneca Highway, and 28. In Kentlands, you were bisected north-south by 355, and a couple of major, I think Redland Road and a couple others that bisected it. Not only were there major roads at several entry points into these communities, Meadow Lawn had 28 and another major road on the 2 sides. But also, additionally, immediately surrounding them, you had a lot of residential, commercial, and office that were complementary. So what I call as osmosis, or the ability to, the porosity of it, of those 3 sites, lent well to their coexisting with their surrounding area. You look at Melford, and you're bounded by 2 major roads with only a single entrance point, and the river. You are really removed from other complementary business and commercial, and the only residential is on the other side of 3, which is independent. Now, it's a challenge, and I said this when I wrote it against it. I wish them well, and I hope you always want people to succeed, and I hope their plan ends up succeeding. I just think that they have major challenges that are not going to be addressed by what they're proposing. And the genie out of the bottle, we're never going to sit there and get back to 0. Now, in retrospect, I kind of wish we had agreed to the 866 housing units they talked about, because the 866 is a little more palatable than the 2,500. But you've got to look at that program, and I really think that is one shining, glaring example of the difference in our approach. I think it should have well vetted in the public before we gave up on the covenants and we knew what we were getting to. It was originally supposed to be 6 million square feet of commercial over that with their vision. The mayor was talking about the great tax windfall that we're going to get from that site. Well, if it's owner-occupied, it still is on the residential side of the ledger, if you will. But it's still well below what the total possibility could have been there had it been fully developed. Now, no one expected it to be fully developed, but I think it's a little disingenuous, if you will, to sit there and talk about all this large tax dollars that's going to come because of the 2,500 housing units it would have had it in commercial too. So my biggest problem was the fact that for the most part, it has not been done in the public. And what you're talking about, the lawsuit, really has to do with the approval of the plan, that it forms the basis for what can go forward. And that is because it's not at all compatible with the master plan and the general plan and other things that the court will decide. But the problem with residential on that site, we've lost that. That boat has sailed long ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will now cut off questions. Rich? But I want to once again thank you too for joining us. This is a risk that we decided we don't want to take because this is an advocacy that we can get into. And with the questions that I asked, and I realized that they were perhaps issues that may have been beyond the city's current purview of handling. But it is something that hopefully that the city can begin working with the county and state to try to solve those issues here in Bowie. I want to leave with two points. One is the number 537. I haven't confirmed those numbers yet, but I heard it this past week. That's how many votes George W. Bush needed to win the 2000 presidential election. Not nationally, but that's how many votes he won the Florida electoral college votes by. And as a result, the Florida electoral votes carried him over the top to win the election. 537 votes out of hundreds of thousands cast nationally. So think about that. And just think about that. Local elections have been won or lost by just a couple of votes. So I highly urge everyone to get out next Tuesday and vote. Cast your ballot. That's the best way to have your voice heard in our government system. Finally, I want to put a plug in for St. Matthew's, what we're doing this month. Rather than celebrate one day of Thanksgiving this month, since last year, St. Matthew's has been celebrating Thanksgiving the entire month. Each Sunday, we're celebrating and we're honoring a group of people who have dedicated themselves to serve our communities, our nation. Today, we honored healers, the medical professionals, the doctors, the nurses, the massage therapists, the physical therapists, the reflexologists, the mental health workers who help to heal the human body and spirit. Next Sunday, we are honoring the defenders, our military veterans. And we're inviting all of our veterans in to join with us. And we will have a reception between the services. After the service, we'll be honoring our military veterans during each service. The following Sunday, on November the 15th, we will be honoring first responders, police, fire, emergency medical technicians, those whose service, their dedication is to serve us in our communities, to protect us, protect our lives and property, and often at the risk of their own lives. And finally, on November the 22nd, we will be honoring educators. And we will have, I believe, someone from Bowie High School as one of our major speakers in the worship service. So I hope that many of you will be able to join us for this occasion as we give thanks to those who dedicate their lives to serve us, to serve our nation, to serve our community. So once again, I want to thank everyone for being here. Both the mayor and Councilman Brady have some brochures in the back table. You're welcome to take what you would like. Also, we have a card back there from the church that announces next Sunday's worship services as we honor the defenders of our nation. So without further ado, I want to thank everyone and wish you all a good week, and please turn out Tuesday to vote. Thank you.